So my background is as a board certified behavior analyst. I've been working in the field of ABA since 2008. Nancy did a wonderful introduction for me, so I do not need to go into too much detail in this area, but like I mentioned, since we opened up Early Intervention Clinic, of which I'm one of the directors, in 2019, I've been specializing in naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions for very young children. So focusing on infants, toddlers, and preschoolers exclusively in my practice. And a big personal interest of mine is parent coaching and parent involvement. This has been a skill set that we've been working really hard to build clinically among our team, because it is so important and it is different from the skills that we learned as direct care providers or as individuals working with children or with paraprofessionals. So it's a different skill set, and it's been really a really exciting learning journey for me. And I'm very excited to share that information with you. So if we have concerns, we're looking at different early intervention service options. We're going to review what some of those are so that we can talk about the specifics around them in a little bit more detail. But these are some of the most common types of service delivery. Going back to what we talked about with neuroplasticity, this is really this graph here shows really the case for early intervention. So if we look along this line here, we have age. So starting with 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, all the way up to 7 years, so a lifetime. And this blue line represents the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. So when kids are young, the ability to change is very high because the brain is so plastic and these neural pathways have not yet been set. As we get older, we get a little bit more set in our ways, and it becomes more challenging for the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. This orange line represents the amount of effort that's required to make these changes. So in addition to really young kids having a lot of flexible brain pathways, they can change pretty easily. There's not that much effort required, but as people get older, we require more and more effort to make the same level of change. So again, case for early intervention in a nutshell: when we get in there early, children's brains are more plastic, meaning that specific early experiences that we present can more easily change the developmental trajectory that's related to social communication differences. Kids also aren't as behind when they're younger. So when we're working on early intervention, the gap is much smaller. And if we can fill that gap with those key early learning skills that babies and toddlers naturally engage in, then kids can roll with that information because they'll have those crucial early milestone skills rather than coming in a little bit later and having the gap be a bit bigger and having to catch up and direct teach every single skill as we go along. This is also supported by recent research that we've seen that actually shows that when studies of early intervention effectiveness are paired with brain scans of autistic kids before and after they receive early intervention, that several studies have found what they call normalization of brain patterns in autistic kids. So the actual brain activity that is happening in the child's brain after they receive early intervention more closely resembles that of someone who is not diagnosed with autism. So types of services that we can, service delivery models that you might see. It's important to note that services are really not a one-size-fits-all approach. And you as a parent do have the ability to work with available service delivery models and professionals in your area to find solutions that fit you and your child's needs. So there are quite a number of community resources that are available that are consultative in nature. And when I say this, what I mean is a professional would provide support and suggestions to caregivers in a sort of general framework of development, but not necessarily focused on a particular trajectory or focus area or type of program. So a great example of this type of service delivery model would be the infant development program or supported child development. So in that case, the professional would work with you as a parent to build a collaborative plan. And sometimes that might include referrals to other services. For infant development, families can self-refer, they can be referred by another professional. And the infant development program also has other sort of group-based classes and that sort of thing that kids can attend. So this particular program is free. And these types of programs tend to be low cost. They're helpful. There's a lot of great information that can connect you with other resources and provide support and reassurance to you as a caregiver as well. They play a really critical role to supporting families, especially in the early days. But it is important to note that these types of programs are not the same as intensive or specialized therapy services, because they're often working with a really general framework. They may or may not have areas of expertise in the specific areas that you're seeking help for. Other approaches might be parent-implemented therapy. So I personally, through my learning journey, used to use the terms parent coaching and parent training interchangeably, and now I refer to them as two different things. But parent coaching really is an interactive process of collaboration between a parent and professional, where you are co-creating the objectives that you're working on together, the change that you're wanting to see. And it's really about empowering parents to help their child or to teach their child certain skills with the support and sort of cheerleading and guidance of the professional, and recognizing that the parent and the professional have their unique and valid areas of expertise. The parent is the expert of the child and the professional is the expert of the interventions, and they can come together to really create magical change for children. Parent training programs tend to be a little bit more focused on working through an educational curriculum and or having more active practice in a specific area. And so the professional would typically guide this process a little bit more and provide strategies, solutions, or support to parents in a particular area or issue. It's really not to say that one approach is better than the other. I think both of these approaches are great and both have their place, because depending on the situation that you're encountering or your needs or your resources in a given moment, one of these approaches might be better suited to what you need. Right? If you have a child you're having issues with toilet training, you might just need a professional to come in and give you some suggestions and help you implement them, and then off you go. That would fall more under the parent training approach, versus if you're really looking for a longer term, more collaborative process, that might be parent coaching, but it's not always going to be feasible if you have, other life demands at play. So I do like to differentiate between these approaches, but recognize that they're both very meaningful contributions to parent life. So another video here. This is just a little example of what a parent coaching session might look like.
I'm Renee Dunn. Marcus, look. I'm Marcus's grandmother. Look. Car? You have a car? He likes playing by himself. And whenever you would sit down with him, he would kind of move away. It's not the game. And he is getting very, very frustrated not being able to communicate.
His grandmother watches him while his parents work. When I first started working with Marcus, he was not talking, not saying any words. He had lots of babbling. He wasn't very interested in playing with others. I'm Jenny Sharpless. I'm a speech language pathologist here at the Kennedy Krieger Center for Autism and Related Disorders. The number one strategy we're going to work on today is just tuning in to what he's interested in and imitating him. So show me how you normally play at home.
Okay, well, the first thing we would do is we would take them out. Now, if he didn't immediately take something, then I'd give him something. There you go. Very good, Marcus. Good.
Great. So he was really good at that puzzle.
Yes.
But the one thing that I noticed is that he's playing and you're watching.
Yes.
I want you to be able to be his play partner. So what was he doing with this puzzle?
He was picking up each piece and putting it in.
Yeah. So
So-
then you will take your turn and do
So let
what?
him do one and then I'll do one.
Yes.
Which we do. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna put one in. Two. Now you put one in.
Already the look of your play has changed. You were playing together. It looked like you were taking turns. It already looked more fun. One thing is we talked about not asking a lot of questions.
Okay. So that is a little example of a parent coaching exchange. And you can see that what I like to focus on in this video is, even though the professional has some really great strategies that she knows are going to be helpful for autistic kids, she wants, the caregiver to incorporate some of these strategies. She's not just coming in and saying, okay, do this, or okay, do that. She's asking these real leading questions to help the caregiver come to develop their own solution. And she's supporting the caregiver to develop their own solution. So it's less about, I'm going to teach you to take turns with your child. And it's more about, this is the goal we're trying to get at. How can we create that together? So I think that's sort of a nice example of the difference between what I might call parent training and what I might call parent coaching, this one being parent coaching. There are a lot of different parent coaching strategies and programs for a lot of different areas. So this is just a really short, not so short list of different approaches. And a lot of these are supported by research. And so there's really just a lot of different options out there. One of the most common ones would be the Early Start Denver model. The ESDM program has always had a very heavy emphasis on parent coaching and parent training. And they've also done a lot of work to disseminate the model in their therapist training program and their parent coach training program. So just by nature of having these resources and training opportunities, that's been helpful to spread the word about these practices. But there are a lot of different ways and programs that we can use when we're looking at parent training approaches. Some of these might be more collaborative, and some of these might be more prescriptive or more of a parent training approach, and that's okay. So another service delivery model that we might have is, that's probably the most common one, arguably, is direct intervention services. So this could be direct therapy with a professional, so someone like a speech language pathologist working one-on-one with a child. Or what's more common in behavioral intervention is a paraprofessional, like a behavior interventionist, who is supervised by a professional. And this helps us increase the frequency or the number of treatment hours within a week within available resources. So the professional then would train and supervise the paraprofessional to implement a high frequency of practice and repetition with therapy services. So types of direct service programs include early intensive behavioral intervention and naturalistic developmental behavioral intervention. And of course, speech language therapy and occupational therapy, they have direct intervention services. So unfortunately, I'm not a speech language pathologist. I'm not an occupational therapist. That's not my area of expertise. So I can't talk about service delivery models or standards of care in those fields, but I have included that information here. So early intensive behavioral intervention has been highly researched, more so with preschool to school entry students. So this is what a lot of the research that we've been going off of for early intervention has been based off of, and a lot of the models for intervention that we've done, for many years now. Is the purpose of this really is to maximize skill development across those developmental domains and help kids catch up to their typically developing peers. EIBI is often recommended to happen at an intensity of about 15 to 40 hours a week, are the ranges that you would see in the literature. Intensive behavioral intervention is sort of a more general application of applied behavior analysis programming across age groups, and it might be more focused in specific areas of need, with a more general intensive behavioral intervention option that's not the early focus. we tend to see a wider variety of frequency and intensity of programming. So when we talk about ABA therapy, early intervention for autism, or ABA in general, we're usually talking about EIBI, or early intensive behavioral intervention. But sometimes ABA is also referred to in these sort of more widespread applications. IBI can also be thought of as sort of what's currently available in British Columbia to kids ages 6 and up, when they sort of age out of the higher levels of funding that's available for kids under 5. Naturalistic developmental behavioral intervention. I'm going to talk about this because it's my area of expertise. So I am a little bit biased in that way. But really the goal of naturalistic developmental behavioral intervention is that it is very similar in a lot of ways to EIBI. It's an intensive form of treatment, but it's specialized for young children, and it brings in the science of developmental psychology that isn't as prominent in regular curricula that are used in EIBI programs. The recommendations for intensity tend to be a little bit lower, I think, at least partially because you're working with younger kids and they can't handle as much as a 4-year-old can. But also because when you're intervening early, you're really capitalizing on that brain plasticity. So that chart that I showed that shows that brains are more likely to change and with less effort. So that's really what we're getting at when we're working with 1, 2, 3-year-olds. There's many different examples of different types of naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions. The Early Start Denver model is one of them. That's the type that I do. I'm a certified therapist in the model, but there are other approaches that use the same principles. And there are a set of principles that guide these types of treatment. So here's a little video of what early intervention using the ESDM might look like.
For its promising results in children as young as 12 months.
Something about these really, really little ones. I think they're still in a developmental period where their peers are learning to talk. They're not out of sync yet with other 18 to 24-month-olds. Everybody in that age is learning to talk.
And we'll go, open boats.
At 18 months old, Matthew was noticeably behind his twin sister and his peers in verbal and social development.
Cupcakes?
But researchers believe they could help him catch up fairly quickly.
Caterpillar.
When he first came to us, he had no language. He made very little eye contact. He had very few play skills. This would be a great way to work on jumping with 2 feet.
He's very good at jumping.
You want more juice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Amy Board is a speech pathologist and the team lead for Matthew's intervention, which included a handful of therapists as well as his parents, who also received training so they can continue the treatment at home. It's an intensive 20 hours of therapy each week.
Where was Matthew's focus during the ball routine, do you think?
The therapy combines several science-based practices for working with autism into one intervention program. So rather than analyzing just communication or eye contact, the ESDM model is designed to work on improving several skills at once.
So during the book routine, you saw me elicit eye contact. You saw me do vocal imitation with him. You saw me elicit sound effects with him with the slurping of the soup. Worms are yucky. And the idea is that we get to teaching about every 10 seconds. So about every 10 seconds, you're going to see some kind of a learning opportunity. And that's our fidelity goal with the ESDM model.
And the results? After 5 months of therapy, it would be hard for someone who doesn't know Matthew to see a difference between him and any other child his age.
So that really speaks to some of the benefits of early intervention. So this child has been in therapy for 5 months and they've seen large differences. And in my experience, obviously, we don't want to rely too heavily on testimonials or case studies because it's not evidence-based. We want to go where the science is. But I've had families sort of tell me, a few months after a child started treatment that they're just sort of plugged in now. Like those key social things that we weren't getting at before, we're now starting to learn that, other people can be fun, and therefore maybe I'll start to look at them a little bit more. And so some of those, working on some of those really key skills can be very a turning point for kids. And that's really what we're looking at in naturalistic and developmental behavioral intervention. So another model for service delivery might be group-based learning. This tends to be an emphasis on classroom readiness or core topics that are relevant to the different participants, such as in a social skills group. The government in their description of these family connection centers has placed an emphasis on group programming. So I do want to focus, just say that group-based learning is really, really, really great for kids who are ready to learn in that environment. Or it can be a really great complement to one-on-one intervention. We do see kids sort of ready to join a group environment, maybe after a year or two of one-on-one support. And group programming can be a cost-effective way to deliver services, but I would be really, really, really hesitant to put a child in a group learning environment if they weren't showing that they had a number of prerequisite skills already. So it'd be really important to do some screening and make sure that that is actually indeed a good fit for the child. I also think in mentioning briefly about the family connection centers and some of the plans of the British Columbia government to change our funding structure, that it is worth noting what the cost of behavioral intervention is. And, we do need to continue to advocate in this area to maintain access to these services, because the way that the changes are going probably doesn't, really doesn't seem like a very good idea to me. So we would be doing everybody a disservice if we didn't talk about this and talk about appropriate budgets for specialized work. But currently, the Provincial Autism Funding Program will contribute $22,000 a year for children under 6. Some of the research that we've looked at states that the cost of an EIBA program was $30,000 to $50,000 per year per child in 1996 in Pennsylvania. So I'm sure 2022 in Vancouver post-COVID, that's going to have to be a little different. In Ontario recently, it was estimated to be $50,000 per year per child. And a group-based ESDM program in Australia was quoted around 48,000. I can't say numbers today. I don't know what's up with that. $48,000 a year for a full day program. It's really important to note that while early intensive behavioral intervention is expensive, it's specialized, it results in a long-term savings of approximately, I think this is $1,103,067 from age 3 to 65 years per
Euros. So even
yes,
more than dollars. Yeah, probably
much more than dollars. Thank you. Yes, I saw that and then missed it. But really, when we provide this key intervention early on, we can save a whole lot of trouble later on. So it's an investment that's very, very, very worthwhile in my eyes. And this is specialized work. This is in some ways cutting edge work and new work. And we need to be able to provide living wages for individuals who are doing this difficult work and appropriate training and resources to provide quality and safe care to our vulnerable students. So it's the family connection centers that are provided would be at the dismantling of the autism funding unit. It's unknown when or how needs-based, this needs-based programming will be determined, and whether or not children will be able to access this type of early intervention in this new model that's being proposed. So I think it's really important that families understand that and continue to advocate for quality care. The time and money that you invest in your child's early intervention will result in savings over your child's lifetime. Absolutely. Now, parent implemented programming can be is less expensive, right? We're looking at the parents being the ones working directly with the children. So what you're paying for is the professional hourly rate times, weekly, bi-weekly visits, that sort of thing. This can be a really great way to start to capitalize on some of that early intervention opportunity if you don't yet have a diagnosis and therefore cannot yet access funding and therefore cannot yet pay for an early intervention programming, this might be a more cost-effective way to start working on something earlier on. I'll just make a little note here about some of the factors that we consider when we determine types of treatment or intensity of treatment, is that there's, like I mentioned before, there's no one size fits all approach. So it's really important that we take into consideration the individual and their needs for learning. So if it's a student who tends to require many repetitions in order to learn something new, a higher intensity program may be indicated in that case. If it's a child where we have many difficulties that are noted across many different developmental domains, so difficulties with fine motor skills, difficulties with independent skills, with language, with social skills, with cognition skills, that would be an indication that we would want a higher intensity program. The age at the intervention onset, an older age of onset may indicate a higher intensity because, like we saw earlier, the brain is a little bit less plastic, and everything that children have been doing so far is a little bit more difficult to change because it's more well practiced. And a younger child may indicate that it's less developmentally appropriate for them to be in a high intensity program. So we do have to take that into account as well. If a child doesn't have a form of functional communication for them, I would definitely prioritize higher intensity with finding a way to ensure that they have some method of communication. And so there are a lot of different options in the terms of augmentative and alternative communication that can help children and families communicate with one another if speaking with mouth words, as some people describe them, is not accessible for a particular child. And with any intervention, it's really important that it is supervised by a quality and qualified professional. So when we have paraprofessionals or behavioral interventionists implementing programming on an ongoing basis, they're not the professionals. They're not trained to deal with a variety of situations. They need ongoing supervision. So the standard of care is ideally we would have 20% of behavioral intervention sessions supervised by a board certified behavior analyst. And at least 50% of that should be in the direct therapy sessions with the child. So that's something to keep in mind, is sometimes we try and make the budget work by reducing the consultation hours. But it's really important that we recognize that we actually, in order to protect children from lack of quality care that can result from minimally trained individuals working with minimal supervision, it's really important that we have professionals involved in the oversight of the care. So all this to say, with early intervention, this really can turn around the developmental trajectory of a diagnosis of autism. And we intervene really early on those key skills to fill in the gaps and help children catch up to their peers. Early intervention is also very well supported by research, including with different models. So there's research for early intensive behavioral intervention. There's research for naturalistic developmental behavior intervention. And there isn't research to say right now that one is better than the other, or that certain intensities are better than others. We just don't have that. So it's looking at what works best for your situation, your family, your child, et cetera. But it is worth noting that in the research, it is documented that some individuals who participate in early intervention may, quote, lose their diagnosis, meaning once they finish an early intervention program, they no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. So if you have concerns about your child development, if anything that we went over in those slides resonated with you and you're seeing some of that in your own child, it's important to get started on the diagnostic process. There is quite a long wait list for assessment right now. These numbers are going off of my memory of what I heard in a conversation with a psychologist many months ago. So it may not be accurate anymore, but we're looking at like an 18-month wait if you're going the public route, or a 6 or more month wait for private assessments, which in my career, that's unheard of. You used to not have to wait for a private assessment very long, if at all. So if you do have concerns, the number one thing I would suggest that you do is get on a wait list. Autism can be diagnosed quite early. Did you have a comment there, Nancy?
I was just going to say that there's also funding, I believe it's from CKNW, if you want to go the private route. So that can help out.
Yeah, and I think Variety has a bursary also for
it might be Variety then instead.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm also putting on the funding is at risk of being taken away currently. And so I've just put on a link to our media page where we have information about, for example, we're going to have a rally, more like a protest coming up, and what things are going on in the province to try to help prevent this clawback of the funding.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to lose individualized funding.
Someone just wrote 2.5 year for provincial funding, and you won't get it in 2.5 years if they take it away. So do go the private route for one, but also keep an eye on that website, and we will also email out to our email list when we're doing a protest, and we're planning it for after work hours or on the weekend. We're not sure when, and it'll be in Vancouver. So
perfect. Yeah, I look forward to hearing more information about that, and we can definitely distribute that to our families as well. Yeah, it's really a shame because autism can be diagnosed quite young. And I guarantee you these are pre-pandemic numbers. So I guarantee you it's much later now in terms of the average age of diagnosis. And we're noticing that in our clinic as well. When we first opened, we had a lot of 2-year-olds coming in, and now they're all 3, 4, 5. So it's really challenging.
And if you can afford it, you don't need a diagnosis in order to hire a behavior analyst.
Yeah.
So go ahead and get started if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So just getting back in on the proposed changes, it's very unlikely that these recommendations are going to solve this problem in any meaningful way. A diagnosis is a really key part of treatment planning. It's really important that we have a diagnosis so we know what types of early intervention to pursue with the child. And given difficulties that many families have finding service providers right now, many kids with varied needs that will come to these family connection centers, there's really the only way that this can result is with wait lists, like more wait lists. I can't think of any other way that's going to go. So please advocate for earlier diagnosis, which is the solution to this problem here, not completely rehauling the system and taking away autism funding. Yeah, so definitely get on a wait list if you have concerns. There are some other organizations that offer resources like the Autism Support Network with these workshops that we're participating in right now. I already mentioned the Infant Development Program. Autism BC also hosts, I don't know if they're doing it ongoing, but they have hosted Waiting for Assessment workshop. And Autism Information BC can give you information about the provincial autism services in general as well. So lots of resources that you can access that way. I'm going to go over some as well that are specific to young kids and early intervention. So the one that I refer families to most often is an online learning module called Help is in Your Hands. It's based on the Early Start Denver model and naturalistic developmental principles, but it is an online self-paced course essentially that goes through these key strategies that we know are really helpful for increasing children's social communication skills at a really young age. So I'm going to show you this here. You make a free account on this website, and then you can access these
Continuing
lessons.
to focus on.
I'm not ready to play. You can access these video lessons that include a nice sort of overview of one specific skill that they're looking to teach you how to use. So we'll just look at an example of that here.
Ways that will help your child learn to talk. We're going to target 1, helping your child learn some specific gestures to imitate and use. And 2, helping your child learn to make speech sounds. One way to practice both of these is to get used to combining gestures and speech when you talk to your child. You can try combinations like waving when you say hi, clapping and cheering and saying hooray, pointing to objects and saying, here's the whatever, there's the whatever, as you name the objects. With children who do not speak much yet, you should add gestures to your speech as often as you can. It helps them learn the meanings of your words.
So that's just a little example of one of the educational videos, and then they follow those up with, with video examples of families implementing these strategies with their kids. So it's a really nice learning resource, and it's self-paced. So you can just go on there and take a look at a module and practice it on your own. They have little reminder sheets. They're called refrigerator lists that you can print out and put on your fridge to help you remember the specific things that you're thinking about. And this is freely available, accessible. All you have to do is create an account and you can log on and access all of this content. There are other online courses that are available that are specifically for early intervention or for working with young kids. So Baby Navigator and Autism Navigator I've talked about already. Dr. Mary Barbera also has some online courses. There are a lot of books that you can access that will share different information about these different strategies that you can use. The one caveat that I want to sort of say with all of this is, while self-learning resources are really great for, if you're strapped on time, you can sort of take your time with things. They're free or they're low cost. They're very accessible, and they do usually often provide strategies that we know are likely to be successful. They're evidence-based, but it's not individualized to you or your child. And what is the most common strategy may not be appropriate for your situation with the specific thing that's happening with your child and your family. And then another thing is there's usually no support or accountability. So if you stop reading the book or if you stop logging into the course, nobody's going to remind you or check in with you. So that's where services like parent coaching can be very helpful, of having something set on your calendar that you can come back to and check in with people. So a little bit more about parent coaching. Some characteristics of really effective parent programs is it really should have a very reasonable time commitment for you, because we recognize that parents are busy. There's a lot going on, especially if you have multiple children or a child with high needs. The time commitment for parent coaching programs is usually one meeting every 1 to 2 weeks, with some daily practice to follow up in between sessions. The materials that a parent coach provides you with should be parent friendly. They should be accessible. They should be clear. They should be focused on the content that the professional is trying to share with you. And professionals should have specific training in parent education and coaching, because I'm sure you can understand, but even the best Olympic gymnasts might not be the best person to teach me how to do a backflip, right? Being really, really good at something doesn't necessarily mean that you can teach that thing very well. And being an expert and professional in autism and applied behavior analysis and service delivery with children does not mean that you can automatically be an effective coach with parents. So there's research and education and professional development in this area that people who are interested in doing parent coaching professionally should be exploring and making use of in order to be a more effective parent coach and to be able to connect with parents and help them really be the best that they can be. So a session outline for parent coaching might be that a parent and a coach make a plan together. The coach observes the parent and child interact for a bit. Then we might kind of chat a little bit and decide on what we're going to do that day, what sort of strategies we're going to work on, kind of like you saw in that video. And then some supportive practice. So that's really where the coaching piece comes in, is once we sort of talk about things, set on some goals and objectives, then the parent will practice that with the coach, providing some live support, guidance, suggestions, etc. during the practice. And that's really where kind of the magic of parent coaching happens, is you have someone with sort of a bug in your ear helping you in the moment learn to do these skills. And these are skills, right? They do take practice. It's not like we can just read a book and then work with the child. It is active. So that's where parent coaching can be really helpful. And then reflection, and then problem solving around how we might do things. You know, if putting a particular toy away is challenging, what strategies might we implement to mitigate that, and that sort of thing. So there's different also flavors of parent coaching strategies. So if your concern is with social communication development, I would definitely look specifically for a naturalistic developmental parent-based coaching program, especially, if your child is a young child, right, under 3. If you specifically have difficulties with problematic behavior, there's a much wider variety of parent coaching options that you might be able to benefit from. There's the Balance program, there's Ruby parent training, there's a lot of other evidence-based programs. So connecting with someone who does parent coaching and letting them know what your concerns are can be a way to make sure that you get the right sort of treatment package. The goal of parent coaching, though, really is to capitalize on the moments that you're already doing every day to incorporate these strategies in teaching moments. And in the video that we watched about the Early Start Denver model sessions, they talked about the child doing 20 hours a week of therapy, and some of that is parent implemented. So the parents are involved in knowing what's happening with the child's goal plan, and then they're able to practice the same skills that the therapists are doing in sessions at home within these sort of naturally occurring routines. Because you're already going to be doing diapering and dressing, so we might as well try and work on, you know, getting your child to look at you during the routine, or whatever the goal happens to be. So the idea is that's not adding a huge amount of stress or work on your day. It should be happening within those sort of regularly occurring times. Yeah. So there are a few providers locally that do offer this service. I'm sure there are others as well. I just have a very brief short list of people that I'm aware of that do this either online or locally. I guarantee you there are others that are good at this. And this is included in the notes as well. So if you're looking for referrals or sources there, I don't think there's anything on the Registry of Autism Service Providers or any sort of local registry that has an indication of specialty in parent coaching. So this might be a place to start. We talked a little bit earlier about group-based services. So there are some of these programs are available for free. This is specifically from the Vancouver Infant Development Program. We also at UP, I'm not aware of any other programs that offer this, but we do have an early start play group. So this is a parent participation toddler play group for families who are either on a wait list for a diagnosis or are waiting for services to start. So this is a program where we really focus on those key strategies that we know are helpful for kids with social communication difficulties. Parents can come with their child and learn how to implement some of these strategies with some modeling, with some guidance. And we have these being provided with quality play experiences and materials and ideas that's facilitated by a certified ESDM therapist. So this is something that we started doing because we saw such a need of families that were coming to us saying they had concerns about their child's development, but they're on a wait list for diagnosis. And you know, it's not always possible to pay for an early intervention program when you don't have access to the funding resources. So this is a way that families can come and get some support that is specialized. So yeah, it's listed on your website, or you can email me if you have any questions. Additional actions that parents can take if you're waiting. You can definitely be looking into what treatment offerings are available, what service providers are in your area. You can be connecting with parent groups and getting sort of checking references that way. But looking into of the treatment options that I have gone over today already, what might be a good fit for your family, what might be a good fit for your child's needs. Is your child a child who may benefit from a higher intensity program? Is that going to be really important? Or are the concerns or areas that you're looking at a little bit less pervasive? If you think you might benefit from a higher intensity program, how might you make that work logistically with daycare, with drop-offs, with all of these things? These are things that parents, when we meet with them at first and they're looking at starting services, it can be hard to prioritize early intervention over, other things that then might be going on. So that's something that you can start think about and start planning. Are there grandparents who can help with pickup and drop off if you're working, and those sorts of things. It does take a lot of coordination, but it's definitely worth it.
I just posted also at our closed parent Facebook group. So that's another good place to check on service providers. If you are thinking of hiring someone, just put a word out. What do you think of this service provider? And they'll private message you with feedback. And with all the feedback you get, you can help make a decision on things. And you can also ask any questions on there if you have any concerns or anything that parents may think about some.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And then you can start to interview providers. You can start to work towards a treatment team. Like I said, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are different perspectives. So definitely, get a feel for who you connect with, whose philosophy feels right for you and your family. You can start treatment without a diagnosis. So you do not need to have your autism diagnosis to access services. Of course, that can be cost prohibitive. So like I mentioned, parent coaching could be an intermediary or complement to other services that you do. Another action item that I have here is just that parents can start to learn about autism in general, or learn specifically about autism from autistics. The caveat here that I'm going to throw in is when you go into this world, I think there's a lot of great information that autistics can provide us with their lived experience that we can learn from, because like I said, this is a new field and we don't, we're learning all the time new things about brain development and autism. But there are a lot of autistics that do have strong anti-ABA sentiments. That's a conversation for another time. There's a lot to unpack there. And the short note is that a lot of harm can come from oversimplification. And so if we are not having qualified people who really know their stuff working with your child, they can do harm, right? Unintentionally. These are good people who have good intentions. They can do things that are harmful. And this is something that I think about literally every day and read about every day. I'm still here practicing ABA. But I'll just follow that up with certain things that I might consider red flags for behavioral intervention practices that may have the potential to be harmful. So if a service provider is giving you a one-size-fits-all standard recommendation for treatment intensity, these are issues that I think are more common in the US with their insurance model, where providers have to ask for a certain number of hours of treatment. But that's where we can get into criticisms over service providers care more about their business and the profitability of their business than their clients. So that's something that I would just be very aware of is, does your child actually need that many hours, or is this person saying all children need this number of hours? Because we talked about some considerations that you might take into account. We don't have the research yet to say what dosage is appropriate for what student. Use of extinction as a practice can be difficult, and many students have talked about difficulties around that. And when I talk about extinction, what I'm meaning is a common form is, say, planned ignoring or ignoring a child who's engaging in attention behavior that's trying to get your attention. And there's ways that we can be behaviorally consistent without ignoring the child. So you can offer emotional support. You can offer a hug if a child's having a hard time, right? Those are not practices that we need to say, if a child is engaging in problem behavior, you have to completely ignore them. And if a clinic does use that kind of planned ignoring, that would be a red flag for me. I would also look for over-reliance of physical prompting without proper safety measures, seeing if the staff have crisis management training, because if transfers or physical prompting are necessary, we can actually get into dangerous situations for child and or staff safety. And if there's blanket suppression of stereotypy or stims, I would say that's probably not required, right? We do sometimes need to teach kids that when we're doing this or when we're learning, it's important that you don't do that because you're not paying attention to me when you do that. But we don't need to say, don't ever engage in stereotypy or suppress it across the board. And I think the last one that I'll just touch on here is making sure that when we're selecting the types of behaviors that we are going to change or teach in an intervention program, that we're not only thinking about how that's going to look according to social norms, and that we're taking the individual's happiness and consideration into account and their preferences as well. So we don't only want to change the child in order to make other people more comfortable. So that's my spiel about early intervention. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. And we do have a little bit of time, so I'm really happy to take questions from people.